Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along and listening to what we've got to say today. And it's been great to hear the presenters before us as well. So my name is Anthony. I am a Community Development Officer with Sanctuary Housing. And this was kind of like my first move into the housing world like 6 years ago. So I find housing and the potential for housing endlessly fascinating. So just to give you a little bit of the context. So Sanctuary Scotland is where we were concentrating the work because that was where I had the ability to have the most influence. So in Scotland, we've got over 7,000 homes. In terms of the housing management team, it's around about 50 staff, just a few more. We've got lots of new developments coming all of the time, and our housing is spread across Glasgow, Cumbernauld, Dundee, Aberdeen, Renfrewshire. So we are very much across the whole of Scotland, and that's just to give you a sense of the scale of what we're trying to do. So my background is actually in community development, and I am a community development worker for Sanctuary. The approach that I take, I try to, as far as possible, to take an asset-based community development approach, which I could probably actually give a whole presentation on that if anybody was interested in it, but that's not what I'm here for now. So basically what that is starting from the point of believing that everybody is capable. And for me, that goes hand in hand with trauma-informed practice, which is why I think it's kind of married up quite well, the work that we are doing with the Resilience Learning Partnership and Shumela. So my first introduction to this kind of area of work was adverse childhood experiences, and Kevin mentioned the Resilience film, and that was kind of where I got into it as well. And actually, you know, a lot of the same names kind of come up. So James Doherty is somebody who I definitely admire and look up to the work of the Violence Reduction Unit and everything that they've done around trauma and ACEs. And whenever I first heard about ACEs, it actually felt like something quite that I knew intuitively, but it gave us a language to hang everything on and to really begin to talk about stuff and have a slightly deeper conversation. It felt incredibly important, but also at the same time, it felt massively overwhelming because it was like, well, what can I do? Because I'm only just getting started in housing, and this stuff is everywhere. So it did feel like a really big thing to tackle. Next slide, please. So I went about the next couple of years just trying to really learn as much as I could, and to give you a timeline, like, so it's this bit of work, I'm rattling through it here, but this has been like 6 years in the making. You know, it's been a lot of dead ends, a lot of energy put into things, and lots of conversations. But I attended a Resilience Learning Partnership event. I can't even remember when it was now because time's such a weird concept at the moment. But I attended one of their events, and I heard Shumela talk, and it was just like inspiring. She just seemed like she was fantastic, and it was the first time that I'd heard the language of trauma used and being trauma informed and the importance of lived experience. And actually, what really stood out to me was about the importance of lived experience, and what I took back and reflected on myself is quite often people with lived experience are expected to just give that, you know, freely for nothing, simply because you've had an experience. You're expected to give that experience to people, and there was always something that didn't really sit very right with me. And RLP talking about that and saying that, you know, this lived experience needs to be accurately valued and paid for. That got me thinking about how can I work with this organisation. So had all of these kind of grand plans, and then coronavirus happened, and obviously the last year and a bit has been very different. But what it actually did for me was kind of chain us to the computer and the desk a bit more. I used to be out and about all of the time, and I didn't have the time to really like appreciate and put the effort into getting this stuff off the ground. And being chained to the computer meant that I could do this. So I reached out to Shumela just by chance on Twitter. And I mean, we've been making grand plans ever since. She's amazing to work with, and I'll hand over to her in a minute to have a bit more of a chat about what they've done. So next slide, please. So internally, I started just trying to have more conversations about trauma, about adversity, and about housing. What does this actually mean for housing? And because I didn't have a housing background, I felt like I could ask some really stupid questions and actually just some simple questions that maybe have got lost in the noise of service delivery somewhere along the line. And around about that period, Sanctuary got a new CEO as well, and he was going around and speaking to people and talking about what his aspirations were for Sanctuary as an organisation. And one of the things he said to me really stuck out and chimed with us, and it was like, Sanctuary care about the people in our houses. Sanctuary care about the people. It's not just about the buildings or the communities. We do care about people. And for me, you know, like that's ideal. That's what I want to do. That's the impact I want to have is with people. But there was something that was quite difficult to square in my head, in that we were still making people homeless. You know, evictions were still taking place. And for me, I couldn't really tie it together in my head. How can we care for people, but also put them through this incredibly traumatic experience that might change lives forever? And so I started to ask some of these really difficult questions. Like it says there, you know, I was constantly speaking to people across the whole organisation, wherever they would listen, sometimes when they weren't listening, but I just had to keep on going, because it very much became for me about, like, what can I do? So that it wasn't totally overwhelming. I had to think, what is actually possible and practical for me to do here? So I'll put it into my own personal development plan, that and my own performance management, that I would raise awareness of ACEs and trauma across Sanctuary in Scotland. And that was really where it started, because it gave validation to the fact that I was able to get on and do this stuff. And I had amazing support from my director and from my line manager as well at the time. So on that, we made a proposal to deliver some really brief sessions just talking about ACEs and trauma for housing management. If you can flick on, please. So those sessions went down really, really well. It was just with the housing team to begin with, but they were very positively received, and people commented that it made them think differently about what they were doing. So I asked folk if they had any appetite for a bigger session. And again, because of the working from home, it meant that we could deliver a longer session in a much more simple way, that I wouldn't have to be driving around the country. So we developed, alongside Shumela, a really basic, but and using some of the NES slides and stuff like that, a really basic grounding in what trauma is, and some questions and exercises on what it means for us as housing. Alongside this, we were writing a paper which actually turned into a project proposal and went to the group exec committee. The way that things work internally in Sanctuary can be a bit mad sometimes, but we had to get sponsorship for a project, and we got 2 people on the executive committee who were really keen to do that. So we had buy-in from the very top level, which is great. And throughout, I was just being incredibly honest with folk. You know, I was very, very honest about the fact that this isn't going to be easy, that we need to do this properly. I've got an echo there, sorry. That we need to commit to it, and that this isn't something that you can just do a few sessions with me and then we call ourselves trauma informed. That's not how this works. It's about change in practice. You know, the system isn't working, the system needs to change, and we are one part of that. So after the initial staff sessions, we developed a bit further, and they're actually now mandatory for staff to attend a trauma session and to get this engagement. And so far, we've trained over 100 staff, and feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Staff have remarked that it's a real eye-opener for them, that it's a return to the housing that they wanted to do, that they do care about the tenants that are in their houses, that they want to make a difference to people's lives, otherwise they wouldn't be in it. It's been amazing. It has been amazing, and we've got people who have put their hand up to become voluntary champions to help me get this message out further across Sanctuary as well. And I think one of the important things that was in it was it helped us to know our limitations as a housing association. You have to know your limitations, because you're not here to solve everything for everybody, but we have like so much potential as housing associations as well. So there was it's been great, and we're still on this journey as well. So it was good to hear Kevin talking about his journey as well, because I think I'm going to steal some of the stuff that he's been doing. I'll pass over to Shumela, because she can talk a bit more in depth about what RLP are doing for us now. So yeah, if you can flick on the slide, and I'll pass to Shumela.
Thank you, Anthony. So great to hear you talk about our journey there. So hi everyone, my name is Shumela Ahmed, and I'm Managing Director at Resilience Learning Partnership. And just like Anthony, I'll give you a little bit of a background about Resilience Learning Partnership and what led us to where we are now with Sanctuary. So Resilience Learning Partnership as an education and training provider, but we have a dual purpose. Our first purpose is to provide learning and development, training and education services for professionals across health, criminal justice, social care and education. How we do that work, how we perform that function, that purpose is actually our second purpose. So all of our trainers, facilitators and education leads have lived experience as well as the relevant academic or professional experience needed to fulfil the roles that they fulfil. And with that, and in that space, we also provide an alternative learning environment for people who have lived experience of trauma so that they can consistently and continuously feed into our work and have opportunities around paid work, education, or whatever it may be. We're also a co-author of the National Trauma Training Plan, and I sit on the Implementation Steering Group, which is chaired by the Deputy First Minister, who we heard from earlier. As Anthony said as well, we are quite a young organisation, so we've only been around for 3 years. And we went from one staff member, which was little old me, to now having a group of over fluctuates between 15 and 16 staff who are a mixture of full-time, part-time and sessional. We're based in Clackmannanshire and we do a lot of local work, but we also work at a national level. And our fastest growing area of work actually is this area of work that we are now doing with Sanctuary Housing Association around trauma-informed policy design and the quality assurance that sits around that as well. So knowing what, if you're implementing trauma-informed practice on any level, you need to know if it's working and the difference that it's making. And, just to throw it in there, because I always love an opportunity to plug what we do. At the beginning of lockdown, we created a COVID response and we made a little film about it. So you can learn more about us as an organisation and about that project as well. But just to, mention the team around that who are absolutely amazing, who are all people with lived experience of trauma and who were actually engaging in just one of our very small projects pre-COVID, are now managing and running that COVID response and to date have delivered over 3,000 craft and self-care boxes, not only in their own community of Clackmannanshire, but across the country. And Sanctuary actually got some of those boxes to their tenants. Could I have a wee next click, please? So yeah, that is really, the actually COVID is what led to this working relationship forming. COVID meant lots of different things and lots of negative things, but actually one of the positive things about it was things were able to happen quicker, I think. Decisions were able to be made quicker. People were thinking a bit differently about how they done stuff. And, our boxes, our craft and self-care boxes were a mechanism. They became a mechanism for us to get things off the ground with Sanctuary and bring things into a bit of a closer timeline, I think, than would have happened if COVID had never have happened. It would have probably took years to get these grand plans off the ground. And so, when we talk about those plans, it was as simple as Anthony said, putting together a project proposal and submitting that and having it accepted. And I know we're short on time today, so I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A. But some of the stuff that we will be doing for Sanctuary includes reviewing their policies. So the top 5 at the moment, we're looking at income management, one of the most important when we think about being trauma informed, because they're often what lead people to evictions or accumulating large amounts of rent debt. So a good policy to really start with, and we are digging very deep into that, and we'll provide a report with trauma-informed considerations, we're calling them, rather than recommendations. Part of the work we will do will also include engaging with tenants, and we're thinking about the different ways that we can do that in light of COVID. Staff engagement as well. So Anthony touched on the trauma champion role. We will help support those staff members and give them further training. We will also be creating feedback forms for staff to fill in regards to the work and how it's going and implementing it, and also again for tenants and how they experience Sanctuary as a housing association. We'll look at further staff training to support the stuff already been done by Sanctuary. And the kind of more exciting thing for us as an organisation is an evaluation and framework toolkit that we will be creating alongside this work. Can I get a next click, please? So this is my last slide, and just a wee slide about that toolkit. I brought someone in to this work who has extensive experience within development and housing and planning and all of that, and has got a very keen eye for quality assurance as well, who is helping us create this toolkit for Sanctuary to evaluate how them working with us has gone and how beginning to implement trauma-informed policies is going within the organisation. But also this will be a tool for us to secure future funding to continue this work, but also if there's other housing associations who are beginning to look at how they start to implement trauma-informed policies within their organisation, because it's not, please don't think it's wasted on me that how huge housing is and how many different policies you have and how far this can bleed in to an organisation, but everything's got to start somewhere. And so having a toolkit that we can hand over to an organisation should they inquire about how we can help them, for them to fill out and kind of almost self-assess about where they are at around trauma-informed policy implementation. So I'm going to leave it there because I know we're short on time, and happy to answer any further questions in the Q&A. Thanks so much for listening.